Thank you so much for joining me today, and thank you so much, everybody, for watching. As you know, basically what I like to do here is bring on the experts that I am constantly grilling and trying to learn things from. And Bruno is a platform engineering ambassador and security expert, platform engineering expert, guy I look to pretty frequently on a lot of the security topics. And for those of you who have been listening to us for a long time and are quite familiar in the platform engineering space, you'll know that security is probably by far one of the fastest growing demographics and really one of the fastest growing domains within platform engineering. Almost 70,000 new people started calling themselves platform engineers in the last kind of 52 weeks, really. And a huge number of those are people with security backgrounds. It's people who have been kind of security focused and are seeing, while a lot of what I do can fall within the remit of the platform engineering team, but focused on the security side. And that's a lot of what I kind of want to talk to you today, Bruno, about and better understand. Because really the question is, why, in your opinion, do you see this happening? Like, what are the principles of security and cybersecurity that are really evolving to meet this kind of platform engineering era? Like, what is this change that's happening?
Well, first of all, thank you, Sam, for inviting me. I really appreciate your kind words. I mean, as a background, as you mentioned, I've been working in cybersecurity, infrastructure, cloud, DevOps. My role is nowadays more on the executive, IT executive level, driving a lot of foundational areas. And I think that your question is very relevant because it has been a tremendous shift on the, let's talk about infrastructure as a whole. It's no longer, I mean, traditionally, platform engineering came a lot as an evolution from DevOps roles from that perspective, as you mentioned it. But what I see is that this is now becoming more and more holistically. That is not just the, let's say, the foundations for software delivery, is the foundations for modern IT. So what we see is not only for from digital development teams that the role of DevOps evolves, but we see both that, but also the traditional IT workloads being now supported by common standardized platform engineering teams that are both curating both for the keeping the lights on, keeping the systems running, but also driving the innovation together with digital development areas. And that's kind of fascinating because that's not very common. That's not typical. And we are seeing that big shift and almost consolidation of roles and capabilities. So I think that comes a little bit from that evolution, even though I think the term platform engineering still means different things to different people. I think we will always have different kind of opinions around that area, but I see, from my perspective, I see more holistically than just looking at software development or supporting, enabling software engineering. I see it enabling the entire modern IT delivery and development.
I guess to zoom in there on that, because a lot of conversations I have with security people, really depending on the maturity of the organization, you can see kind of how they're you can all right, let me say you can see their maturity based on how they're kind of thinking about security in the platform engineering landscape. If they're still talking about, oh, we need to make sure that the silo of platform engineering and the silo of security are communicating with each other well, or if they're talking about, do we even have a security team anymore? Is the security team something that falls entirely within the remit of platform engineering? Is that how you're thinking about things as well, or is it still, we'll always have a dedicated security team, and then there'll just be security people within the platform who are dealing with security platform engineering related stuff?
I think that's a great question, and of course, complex answer because it really depends a little bit on the company, the size of the company, the type of the company, the industry, even. I think you will always have security experts and security teams. I mean, let's also like maybe park because when we think about DevOps and platform engineering or infrastructure, those are very big areas, right? It comes even across that you have identity and access management, you have database management, um, you have on data center management, you have cloud management. There's different areas or sub areas, if you will. But the same happens with security. I mean, if you think cybersecurity, and I mean, cybersecurity is a lot connected to risk management, to compliance. It is about building resilience in the organization. Sometimes we have security teams or security in some organizations, the security is not part of IT. Sometimes CISO roles are completely separate. So it really depends on the style of or the organization, the culture, the maturity. I think even when you look at cybersecurity, you have these different domain areas. As an example, not everything is done through a SecOps team in a, let's say, in a platform engineering. For instance, if you have a security operations center, a SOC, when you have SOC analysts, or you have threat intelligence specialists. So you name it. So there's a very big kind of domain area. Now, there is a lot of, I won't say overlap, but connection points. And I think here comes also that how cybersecurity has been evolving across organizations. I mean, we are no longer talking about cyber from a perspective of just having cyber specialists that, in a way, are conveying when an incident happens and responding to that or investigating. We are talking cybersecurity becomes a strategic driver actually in companies, especially in Europe. We're now thinking I'm based in Europe, in Northern Europe in this case. Um, and in Europe, you see a lot of movement with compliance, such as NIS 2, which is, as an example, on how critical infrastructure can be more resilient. When you think from that perspective, it's no longer just a technical specialized function. It's something that sits actually in the boardroom. It sits on the executive team level. The way that you look at cybersecurity or that you look at resilience is completely different. And maybe the word resilience to me is actually the most important because I think that's actually what bridges these two worlds quite a lot. Because if you think about platform engineering or SREs or DevOps, it is all about how you make things more efficient, how you think things more robust, more resilient, and this is where the two worlds come. So I think that they complement each other. They don't, in some extent, there are some people that overlap, but I wouldn't say that they replace each other. So that it's different hats, if you will.
Well, it makes perfect sense. And when you think about so many of the things that platform engineering is strong with, the things that platform engineering is very good at, and often what comes as almost a secondary effect, I think is what a lot of us have learned. 2 years ago or 3 years ago, so much of the conversation around platform engineering was on kind of DevX, developer productivity. And so many of the explanations for, well, how is the platform going to improve that DevX? It's like, well, it's going to have more standardization. The standardization will make it easier for the developers. It'll, reduce the configuration drift. It'll be easier for their workflow. And then you start to think and you're like, well, actually, that also reduces the surface area. It actually reduces the number of kind of at-risk different configurations you have. It creates a more secure environment. Now, my gut or my theory has been that this has been part of what has started to lure in a lot of security teams or security into the platform engineering space, is this realization that lots of the things that you would do anyway, focused on the kind of the more DevX, a lot of the infrastructure stuff, have these secondary benefits of security. Is that something that you have seen, or has it been more of a, and I know I shared questions with you before, and then we talked about it, and now I'm way off. I've gone rogue.
Keep keep
so
keep going because I
so
think
you can at
you
any
are
time
making
you
good
can be like,
questions and
yeah.
you are making good questions. You can go wrong as much as you want on the questions. No, I think you are touching very key points, and I think this is also goes to the point that I was making that people interpret platform engineering in different ways and shapes, and I
Mm,
think it has been traditionally connected to software development. I mean, I've been a software engineer, so I know where does it come. But if you think even what you just said the, I mean, is an utopia to think that the platform engineering will always standardize things for developers. It's a never-ending story, right? I think it's still a good direction to try to maybe standardize processes and capabilities rather than standardizing, in a way, tooling or infrastructure, if you will. Or I think because I think this is the first thing that comes into mind of engineers is that when think about standardization, they think about, everybody needs to use this tool or that, everybody uses Kubernetes or everybody
These are
uses
the
this and
five
that.
templates you have, and
Yeah,
those are the ones you have to
exactly. They
use.
thinking, yeah, exactly. And this is much, I think you need to elevate and lift yourself a little bit on that because it is more about how do we standardize capabilities and processes. And then, of course, in some cases, it will generate those templates. It might not generate templates. But if you take that, and I think the developer persona is one, but then the other one is a lot of the IT real estate that you have in a company is not necessarily just coming from software engineering or digital development. It comes from the, let's say, old, boring, uh, off-the-shelf software that you are either purchasing in the company as a SaaS or you are self-hosting in your public cloud or in your data center, right? When you look at the entire IT investments in a company or spend, the majority comes from that part. It is your ERPs, it is your business platforms, your business applications. And on those alone, you have a lot of standardization and consolidation that you can do. And this is why it's important that when I think about platform engineering, I don't think just platform engineering that you are supporting the developer persona. I think also how you are supporting the IT service managers that are responsible for different application areas, if you will. And there you can also standardize quite a lot of things. Not, and you might standardize from the perspective of the buy versus make decisions that you are able to, hey, now we have customized tooling for a lot of things that maybe we can replace with a single platform. This type of discussions is what is attracting the standardization of platform engineering, but is also what is bringing a lot of value in the connection to reduce your risk levels because cybersecurity is about helping organizations to decrease their risks or to mitigate their risks, if you will. And when you think from that perspective, this is where the power comes to of building this bridges and connection points. And this is maybe a very untapped area because I will say that not many companies are thinking from this perspective. We still see those silos, cybersecurity as a silo, developers as a silo, platform engineers that are supporting developers as a silo, and also this traditional IT infrastructure as its own silo. So when you start actually to connect the dots, and I think how do you connect the dots? You connect the dots by thinking about IT governance as a whole and IT operating model as a whole. And when you look at that, if you think about your service management processes, when you think about your service integration, your entirely delivery chain, both from, let's say, the infrastructure platform level, but also from your employee experience, from your customer contact points experience, then you actually start to see that a lot of things that we complicate can be a lot simpler if we just combine these different point of views into a single common operating model as IT. And I think this is a little bit has been a little bit our journey from that perspective. So I think that we have been taking a lot um, of that, and I also advise companies on this topic where I see exactly this logic hitting, regardless of the industry that you are in. You can always simplify it from this perspective, and I think platform engineering is gaining a lot of traction because it is a way for organizations to simplify tremendously their IT delivery and development.
I think it's a really, really, really extremely key point, this one. So if you're watching this in a clip, which you probably are, because I bet I clipped this because it's such a perfect, because when, we talk about platform engineering, like platform engineering is not called application developer platform engineering. The key thing about platform engineering is that you're not building a platform for serving app dev. Sure, probably many of the people listening are, but it's about treating the users of your platform, whatever it may be, as your customers. Now, those users could be, as is quite common now, a lot of data teams. They could be a lot of AI related teams. They could be business intelligence people, they could be security people. And the fundamental kind of aspects of platform engineering are fairly universal and can be used exactly like you just said along almost the entire IT organization. I think it's why, a lot of the questions that I shared were about the technical stuff, about the tool stuff. And naturally, we've already gotten onto the cultural questions because it's the cultural and the organizational part of platform engineering, I think, which is really key. It's this reframing of how we think about the problem and thinking about something as a product that has users, that has customers that need to be served. We see this a lot, really a lot in all the conversations that we have. The more mature an organization, the more they're starting to understand platform engineering is not something only focused on the domain of serving developers, especially application developers. Sure, that will be a part of it, but it's something that includes huge amounts of observability. It includes huge amounts of data platforms, AI platforms. The number of conversations around GPUs that I've had is 100x this year with platform engineers compared to what it was 2 years ago. And then when you think about so much of the other IT or software that's being used, just as you mentioned, especially in, big German companies, most of the platform engineers at big German companies I'm talking to are dealing with internal logistics software, far more than they are dealing with application developers. And what they're doing is exactly platform engineering. And I think it's really important, which is why, and this is an interview of you, but I'm harping on here for a moment, that the people listening understand that platform engineering is a much wider a way of approaching it's a way of approaching software delivery and IT more than it is a simple kind of new framing of DevOps to serve developers. And to really kind of peek behind the curtain a bit on what you're talking about, I want to go into some of those kind of cultural challenges. Many organizations do not think like this. IT, for being allegedly very fast moving, isn't automatically a fast moving forward thinking thing by default. And so how do you kind of approach some of these challenges? How do you approach this reframing of like, hey, we shouldn't be thinking about IT as these 10 different siloed domains. We should actually be thinking about it as one thing. That's quite I think, a big ask, a big pitch, probably with a lot of politics involved. Platform politics is the key word that is going a bit viral on social media at the moment. So I'm really curious for your insight on that.
Well, I actually haven't heard about the term platform politics. Maybe I'm out of that loop. But I do. I mean, I do see where it comes from, and I think that it is not easy because it is. I mean, it's not a crusade that one goes in a company and tries to do that. It's about culture. It's about the maturity of the organization, and some things do take time. Some things do take time even to bring different points of view together on building that. I mean, in our case, or I mean, I think we started maybe from that app platform support perspective. I mean, it came a long way. It required quite a lot of changes in our culture, in our maturity. And when I say maturity, I mean maturity of our thinking. I mean, say maturity even of our, let's say, security posture or tooling adoption. I'm not talking about that, even though that is, of course, important. But maturity of thinking comes from, in a way, um, I mean, undeniably, it helps how the company is structured to think about. I mean, organizational structure does not just influence architecture, as the saying goes, it influences also culture, right? And I think that in a way, it's all about people and the people to drive things forward. I think in our case, very, very pragmatic. I think that one was we had a good maturity when it comes to the on the digital development or software development on the thinking there. I think we saw a gap on this traditional core IT in terms of of the maturity of the technology and the foundations there, we were able to combine processes and combine skills and thinking. That also helps to think that, I mean, when I'm thinking about platform engineers, I mean, I'm looking at different domain areas, almost different technology squads that are looking at different parts of that wider problem. And to me, for instance, data data platforms are platform engineering, are a subset of that. Also, integration platforms. I think more, that is one area. I will say that other is also, of course, traditionally how you do cloud management or data center management. It is, of course, or how you do this DevX type of tooling. That's, of course, a natural one by definition. Identity and access management, tremendous importance across. Network and connectivity, another one. And another one that is especially given our topic is cybersecurity platforms. Because cybersecurity also needs on platforms. If you think about team, a SOC team are analysts. They are building on cases. They need to build the detections into something that into a certain CM platform, and that platform needs to bring data. It's a data platform of its own, if you will, or a specialized one. But that is also engineering. That's also a platform. And when you combine these different domain areas, then you need to anchor them into the same, let's say, processes, the same support model even. So that means that when someone looks at how are the dependencies between tools, between these different squads, between the different areas, that you are able to see that, for instance, in a single observability tool, and then you are even combining that with the applications that consume it. And when you start building that web of, you start to actually creating, codifying your delivery model. Your operating model jumps from being, or I'm talking about IT operating model, jumps from being something on a PowerPoint to actually be something in real life, to be something in practice. And all of this takes years. I mean, this is not an easy thing. I think you can put the building blocks in place, but the maturity, it's never ending, right? And more important is that you start. More important is that you find the right sequence to things. And the sequence to things, how do you I mean, how do you eat an elephant? You need to slice different parts, right? But each organization are in different points in time or different maturity levels, that the way that you slice that elephant, that you sequence, is different. It's unique. And you need to find that what makes sense today aligning with the business objectives that we have. Because the worst that I see sometimes when I'm advising some companies, enterprises or startups, they all face the same problem, which is quite oftentimes you have great platform engineers, great engineering leaders, great software developers that come with this type of thinking, right? Which is good thinking, but they struggle and sometimes fail to find, how do I adopt this in a company? Because I'm 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 trying to. We have a good group of people, critical mass that wants to do that. There's no traction from leadership, right? Or vice versa. Leadership wants to do, but then the engineers or sysadmins they are not tracking that. Quite often, time that comes from not finding the right moment to sequence things. Meaning that look at what actually is in your business objectives for this year. Look at in the next 3 years. What is a company strategy? That helps to frame how you want to do that adoption and that transformation. In some cases, the ambition might be very low. In some cases, the ambition might be very high. Finding the right moment is incredibly important. I think we've struggled sometimes to do that. Um, so there's no single answer. It depends. But I just wanted to open a little bit more of what I mean with that.
I'm sure everyone would always love if the answer could just be, do XYZ, done. But unfortunately, every organization is different. Every geo is different.
Mm,
I think to zoom in here on one part of this, is the influence that one can have in shaping this change. I think you come from, you are a kind of a senior IT leader. You get to be often in the driving seat or in the room where the driving is discussed. And how does that change your ability to kind of succeed in this? Is it possible for an organization to kind of undergo this change from the ground up, or does it really need, you either need to be the leader, either of the platform team or of the IT department as a whole, or you need to get that person on board with you? Or is it just impossible otherwise?
A really great question. I think that no, you don't need to be the CIO to make those type of changes. I strongly believe that everyone has the capabilities to drive things further. Now, of course, naturally, it's very different when you have formal authority over a certain area, you are responsible, you are accountable for a certain area, versus when you are influencing certain area, right? And I think in essence, unless you are the CEO, and even if you are the CEO, you have a board. You are always you are always seeing it from one angle, and you have a certain mandate or a certain responsibility area. So, for instance, I know companies that have a CIO and a CTO, and that persona is different. And then you have this when you have this two separate, you have basically often you have this typical core IT infrastructure versus the digital development, right? And they don't. So I mean, you will always be in a position, regardless of your role in the company, where you need to influence, where you need to bring people along that vision. That, of course, depending on your role, it means that you can accelerate some certain things versus others naturally. But I strongly believe that you can do that from different angles, and you need to do that from different angles. You need to be able to influence with and without formal authority. Now, it will impact a little bit this sequencing of events. Naturally, if I'm responsible for certain areas, it means that I can drive my areas or my thinking a little bit on the things that's up to me or up to my teams versus others. But I wouldn't say that. I will say that when people are aligned, especially when they rally around business objectives or the same objectives, when the incentives are right, I strongly believe that this tends to happen more organically. But it requires a little bit of that thinking. I think without jumping into execution, that requires some thinking of what could be the right steps. And I think maybe another one, and actually I often get this question, which is when you start building that, people have this weird idea in general that if you are a leader in a certain area, that you know exactly what needs to be done, right? There is like, okay, you have this vision. Yes, but I can tell you, I mean, I often, my vision is very blurry. I know where I want to be in terms of outcome in a certain point in time. I don't necessarily care if we are taking a longer route or a smaller or a shorter route, or if we take a little, as long as people are getting towards that direction. Direction and is to me more important than pace, right? You can be very fast paced, but you are running in a completely different direction as a company. But you can have a slower pace, but you are heading together in the right direction. And I think finding that North Star, that right direction, is more important. I don't need to have all the answers, or I need to understand what are the outcomes that I want to drive. And I think this is a little bit different. And regardless if you're a platform engineer or a developer, I think it's good to think from that perspective. A big change starts with small steps. And I think it's also people underestimate that.
No, absolutely. I think people always underestimate that. The pace at which things can change, small step at a time, is always a bit surprising. I want to zoom in a little bit on the kind of the informal mandate or the idea of a mandate, because I think there's definitely a lot of head of platforms listening whose mandate is probably something around getting software out faster. Their mandate has nothing to do with security. It has nothing to do with data. It has nothing to do with AI. And they probably, if they're a listener, know that these are big domains where they could be driving a lot of value. How would you kind of recommend they go about proving that? There's,
Yes.
a risk of stepping on toes. There's the politics question. How should they approach that?
Yeah. Well, I can actually give you a personal example from a few years back that touch, and it is an example that I have been give I gave already in a few public talks in the past years. But I think one of the challenge when you are looking at when you are responsible or infrastructure, platform, or connectivity is that people don't connect that work, the operative work, they don't connect with innovation. And this is one of the gaps. I mean, and this is not new. I mean, we had that for the past 20 years. If you think about system administrators or database um, engineers versus software developers. I mean, people tend to gravitate to the software developers because they were shipping new features. So the running the operations is always seen as a burden, right? I mean, commonly this has been the thinking for the past 20 years. It's development versus operations. Where do you want to put your money? Well, I want to put more developer new features for our customers rather than that, right? This is a common. It's a problem of perception, especially from people who are not in IT to even some in IT, but to understand a little bit of you know where to what's the importance of running healthy operations or modern operations. Now, one thing that we were seeing, I mean, I had one example that we used was that at the same time that we created a virtual platform engineering group, and this was like a few years back, a bit more loosely defined, but in the sense maybe more on the supporting enabling application development from that perspective. So a bit more platform engineering in the more narrow sense of it. Um, at the same time when we did this, we also started we created one concept of a function called Rapid Development Hub, where the idea was that we want to do rapid prototyping and rapid experimentation. The idea was that anyone in the company that has an idea we could validate that idea in 3 weeks. So it's a little bit a rapid iteration process. But we made a twist also on this. I mean, that is already good, but we made a twist, which the twist was that we also want to make sure that when we do that rapid prototyping, that of course, if we want to continue forward, so that we want to use, we want to be good company citizens, so to say, and follow our processes, follow our policies. We are using our public cloud environments, all of those things, right? Um, which is kind of fairly obvious that you want to do it. But oftentimes, when people do rapid prototyping, they tend to cut corners. We didn't want to cut corners. We wanted to make sure that we had a good foundation, right? And one of the things was a very almost silly thing, but it was that for us internally to request a new public cloud accounts or subscriptions or accounts, it was taking quite a lot of weeks. It was requiring a few different approvals. It was requiring onboarding meetings and things like that. And naturally, if you want to do prototyping in 3 weeks, you cannot be 1 or 2 weeks waiting for this, right? You are losing a lot of steam. And then why would you? Because I mean, with my credit card, I can go to Azure, I can go to Amazon, and I can just open an account in a few minutes. So when I started that two different concepts, I had one metric to the platform engineering group, which is the credit card metric. I need to be able to, we need to be able to find a way to create these subscriptions or create these accounts in cloud in the same measure that I do at my home with my credit card, right? 30 minutes or less type of thing, right? So why will it be complex? And when we started, I mean, that was a very simple part of the problem. But when we started to do that, we started to first looking a little bit design thinking and the service design and looking at the process. What happens when I request an account? Who gets that request, that ticket? What happens then? And when you start mapping the flow and the process, we started to look that, okay, there's manual points, there's things that are already automated, there's things that could be automated. So when we rethought the entire process, we actually end up with 5 minutes. We went from weeks to 5 minutes. And this is a very silly example. And I know it's silly because there's a lot bigger problems in the business and others. But this um, kind of made people reflect of the importance of have a healthy modern platform engineering. When we are able to reduce the friction for innovation from weeks to minutes. And I think this is a people, I mean, these examples are so powerful and they are sometimes trivial for engineers, but they are not trivial. I mean, they are very powerful in the communication to execute to business stakeholders, but also to get executive sponsorship. I think you need to have people that understand that vision, or at least they can understand why that exists, right? And I think that that's maybe like one of the find those examples in your companies and solve real problems. It might be the most boring problem. People underestimate solving boring problems. If you have a boring problem that affects on 100 people, they are worth solving, right? So I think that think from that perspective.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Bruno. I think this was a wealth of knowledge. I know you and I could talk for 4 hours. So maybe once this we get a few more of these under our belt, we'll start doing the 4 hour Joe Rogan style, and I'll get to really grill you for hours and hours. But thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. I learned a
Happy
lot, and I'm
to.
sure everyone listening did too. So
Thank you
thanks
so
so
much.
much,
Happy to. Cheers.
and
Bye.
thanks everybody. Thanks for watching. Bye.